1, 2, 3, 4.
Coming up next, it's Toonami.
Coming up next, it's Toonami on Cartoon Network.
Cardcaptor Sakura was a show that had a brief run in the spotlight when anime was just starting to become mainstream outside of Japan, but its popularity seemed to be fleeting. While I have distinct memories of Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblades, Sailor Moon, and a whole host of other 90s anime being shown on TV during my childhood, I have no recollection of Cardcaptor Sakura being given the same treatment. Apparently, it aired on both Channel 10 and Cartoon Network here in Australia, but I don't remember watching it. The only memory I have of watching the show in my childhood was on a DVD I'd borrowed from the local library. I can't be the only one who doesn't have very strong memories of this show though, as I rarely ever hear it being brought up. It's a little surprising to me considering the aesthetic appeals heavily to girls, but all of the big action segments which are featured appeal perfectly to boys. The first dub season contains 35 episodes, and it first aired in Japan in April 1998. It took a very long time for Cardcaptor Sakura to make its way outside of Japan, and most likely only received a dub thanks to the strength of other properties that had thrived. The first English episodes aired in June of 2000, a few months after the show had completely finished airing in Japan. I'm very intrigued by this show, so let's see what we think of the first season.
Cardcaptors, a quest for all time. Cardcaptors, Cardcaptors.
My first impression of Cardcaptor Sakura was less than stellar. In the dub, you're immediately hit with one of the worst intro songs I have ever heard. It sounds like a very poor imitation of the first Pokemon theme. The first episode introduces us to Sakura, a 10-year-old girl who comes into contact with a mysterious book her father had brought home from work. Strangely, nobody had been able to open the book, but when Sakura comes into contact with it, it flares to life. This is the Clow book, and it's the catalyst for her becoming a cardcaptor. The awakening of the book has the unfortunate side effect of allowing almost all of the Clow cards to escape though. I'm going to compare the show again to Pokemon because the Clow cards are essentially Sakura's Pokemon, with each of them having unique abilities. The premise of the show really is just Pokemon, but with mythical cards instead of animals. It's also quite similar to the Yokai Watch anime in that the young main character has to round up a bunch of magical creatures while going about their school life, and both shows have one of those creatures as a mentor to help explain things to them. Kiro, the guardian beast of the Clow, is also awakened here, and he becomes Sakura's guide to the brand new world she's just discovered. Kiro's voice is almost nails on a chalkboard levels of annoying at first, but over time it does settle down a little bit, and I guess I adjusted to it because it didn't stick out too bad in later episodes. This origin story all happens quite quick, which I like because so often origin stories can get tedious. Here you have Sakura becoming a cardcaptor in a timely manner, which means the show can get on with the action. As you might have guessed, Sakura is tasked with tracking down all the Clow cards that escaped, and this serves as the plot for most of the episodes here. From the first episode, you'll also be introduced to Kiro's Corner, which is an end segment in almost every episode. Here, Kiro just recaps the episode and sometimes gives out a little additional character info. This segment really adds nothing and actually takes up a fair chunk of time. If you deduct the intro and Kiro's Corner from the runtime, most episodes end up only being about 17 minutes long, which is pretty short. Cardcaptor Sakura meshes slice of life with a more action-focused anime. Episodes will almost always start off with Sakura going about her life at home or school, and as the episode progresses a little further, she'll encounter a Clow card and the action portion will take over. The early episodes get this blend perfect, and I think there's great interactions between the two different styles. You'll notice the majority of Sakura's attempts at capturing cards take place at night. This is because Sakura wants to keep her being a card captor a secret, and obviously it's less likely that anybody's going to be around at night. This was a nice little attention to detail, and I think it made the action and slice of life work together harmoniously. Unfortunately, about halfway through the season, the show just flies off the rails. Most of the early episodes follow the exact same formula of Sakura going about her life, discovering something that seems a little off, and then her capturing a card. It feels like the writers realised this may get slightly repetitive if stretched out over a whole season, so they attempted to change it up. But their attempts were so poorly executed. Instead of introducing a multi-part arc or something, they basically turned the show into a completely slice-of-life focused anime. I enjoy a good slice-of-life anime, but this isn't why anyone would be drawn towards the show, and it's not where the show thrives. If you only watched episodes 16 to 19, you would hardly know that Sakura was a cardcaptor. There's an episode where Sakura visits her great-grandfather, and save for a little 15-second thing near the end, card capturing isn't even referenced. It seems like this episode existed to help flesh out her backstory, but the problem is we don't learn anything we didn't already know. We see the same thing in the beach episode, which is admittedly better, but still over half the episode is just unimportant filler. I feel like I understand why they did this, but it's still a little baffling. The episodes like these add nothing to the show, and each time card capturing is shoehorned at the very end in quite forgettable ways. They contain the bare minimum amount of references to the Clow cards, and if they removed these, it would have just been a full-fledged school comedy. I wanted to watch Sakura grow as a card captor and continue to grow her abilities, but the writers kept denying me of that. No offense to those that do, but I don't give a fuck about any of these characters running a school race. This isn't what drew me in and made me interested in the show. Right after a stretch of filler episodes, they introduced Lee, who is a fellow card captor. This piqued my interest again, as I thought we were about to head into a cool arc here, but ultimately, it's a bit of a letdown. The show mostly continues to operate as normal, just with Lee helping out with the capturing from time to time. In episode 27, they make a similar hint towards the wide world of card captors, but never really go in depth, which is frustrating. 35 episodes is a lot, and not having some major plot introduced means it kind of became like a Ubisoft game side quest, where they ask you to unlock a bunch of towers or collect a bunch of feathers. Not having a single multi-episode arc just means the season drags on. The combination of having episodes either follow the exact same formula, or alternatively, featuring no Clow cards whatsoever, means I lost interest and motivation halfway through the season, and eventually the show just became background noise to me. I was also extremely put off by Sakura's infatuation with her brother's friend Julian. As I mentioned earlier, Sakura is just 10 years old, but Julian is 17. This always felt creepy to me because there are a lot of times where it seems like Julian knows what's going on and just exacerbates the situation. Julian acts so weird, strange and creepy towards Sakura at times that I was honestly expecting him to be a Clow card or some sort of evil person in disguise. I'm only halfway through the entire series episodes though, so I suppose there's still time for this to be true and make it all less skeevy, I guess.
Release the power of card captors!
I sense a Clow card.
Join Hiro and Sakura and track down the 52 mysterious Clow cards. Part fight, part fashion show, Cardcaptor's magic battle dolls have the action all sewn up.
I dubbed you the Cardcaptor.
Release the power! With Hiro, Mei-Lin, Lee, and Sakura. Cardcaptor's magic battle dolls, plush, and mystical Clow book and cards.
I know I'm being very negative on Season 1 of Cardcaptor Sakura, but I actually don't think it's bad, and that it actually has a bunch of positive things about it. I was particularly impressed by how many powerful female characters were present. I feel like Japan are just way better in general about having strong and well-written female characters, and Cardcaptor Sakura is a great example. Sakura being the main character is an obvious one, but as you go through the season you'll find that the majority of Clow cards are female in design, and there are quite a number of strong women showcased throughout. The Clow cards also make for unique, interesting, and creative villains. Clow cards can basically be absolutely anything, which means there is able to be a lot of variety when it comes to Sakura fighting them, as well as when she uses them herself in the future. As she continues catching cards, Sakura slowly learns more and more about the world she has found herself in. I always enjoyed these new insights and wished they would go in depth with it even more. Being introduced to Lee and Sakura's constant foreboding dreams made me want to explore so much more of this world, but they never give you anything more than a tiny peek, which was constantly frustrating. The show also manages to handle being emotional quite well. The backstory of the passing of Sakura's mother is done really well, and in my opinion, it fleshed out not only her character, but the rest of her family too.
Within this book are cards, and within the cards are forces beyond your imagination. But the cards have escaped, unleashing chaos on the world. Now, Lee and Sakura must capture them and use the forces of good to conquer the forces of evil. Prepare for a quest unlike any you've seen before. Prepare for Card Captors, coming in June on Kids WB.
Season 1 of Cardcaptor Sakura is very middle of the road. There are a whole bunch of positives about the show, and after the first 12 or so episodes, I was ready to scream about how much I love it. However, around the halfway mark, you start to get hit with a bunch of issues. The decreased focus on cloud cards was baffling, and the fact that the basic formula of episodes is never really strayed away from means that this 35 episode season drags on. Having said that, I'd still probably recommend it to you all, as some of these issues may not be as big a problem for you, particularly with so many positive aspects on display.